Okay, so the Montreal Canadiens got clobbered on Saturday night 7-2 against the Colorado Avalanche. Does that really mean they had a bad week? No. They come away with 4 out of a possible 6 points on a Western road trip that was extremely difficult, where they looked good for 2 games and then faced a powerhouse. I thought they would get 3 points. So guess what? Time to talk some puck. Hey gang, Costa here from PuckTalk Montreal, welcoming you to this November 30th edition of the show where we look back at the week that was for the Montreal Canadiens. And what a week. We saw them beat the Utah Mammoth on Wednesday by a score of 4-3. We saw them beat the Vegas Golden Knights 4-1 on a Friday afternoon. And then the very next day, they got hammered by the Colorado Avalanche by a score of 7-2. Now, there are a few things that you need to look at when it comes to this week. Number one is some of the performances by certain players. We'll look at that a little bit later on in the show when it comes to studs and duds. But overall, if you take a look at the performance of the team, their shooting percentage way up. And against a team like Colorado, I don't know if there is very much that we could have expected. They are outclassed completely by Colorado. And that's not to say that the Canadiens are a bad hockey club. They are dealing with a lot of injuries. So a lot of their key players are out. What would the team look like against Colorado if you had an Alex Newhook in? Or if you had a Caden Gooley? Or even Kirby Dach, who was playing relatively well before he broke his foot? There's a lot to be said about the injuries and the problems that it's creating for the Montreal Canadiens roster. So to be fair, you can't really say that the Canadiens played that bad against Colorado, although they did make a lot of mistakes. They allowed Colorado a lot of speed to the neutral zone. They missed coverages in their own zone. There's all kinds of things that could have gone better versus Colorado. But then when you take a look back at Vegas and you take a look back at Utah, you have to think to yourself, you know what? They played extremely well. Granted, there are a couple of people out there that were dead sticks, for lack of a better term. But overall, the team performance was something to be really happy about. From lines 1 to 4 through the first 2 games, they got pretty good contributions. Saturday's game, not much there. Not from anybody, for that matter. So what do? Well, number one, let's take a look at this week's studs and duds. And when you take a look at studs and duds, you got to start with stud number 1, and that has to be Sam Montembeault. A lot of you are going to say, oh my God, coach, you've lost your mind. No, guys, I've been critical of Monty since the beginning of the year, even into the preseason. Really critical. So if I don't throw flowers at a guy who's fighting to find his game, then what kind of an analyst would I be? Okay. Montembeault adjusted his style, played at the top of his crease, was good laterally, made saves when he had to, reactionary saves when he needed to, and he kept his team ahead. It was really important because Vegas was pressing. And so there were rebounds that he allowed. He stopped those pucks. But for the most part, if you take a look at his positioning and you take a look at the way he played, he was outstanding. You can't take that away from him. And I can't say anything about that. His performance, I mean, he faced over 30 shots versus Vegas. So you can't really besmirch the guy for his ability to stop pucks. He only allowed 1 goal in that hockey game. He was really calm. His reflexes were good. I mean, he allowed the Canadiens to maintain the lead. And he made several highlight reel saves. One of them, yes, it was self-inflicted because the puck popped out of his glove, but he did make the save thereafter. But overall, for a team that's having problems defensively and is allowing a lot of high-quality shots in their own zone, Montembeault played extremely well and mitigated those opportunities, even going so far as to smother pucks that he would otherwise have played into a corner or out into the slot for no apparent reason. We've seen that before as well. So you got to give him credit. I'm not going to be here and just shit on a player all season long. It's not right. He played well. Give him credit. Can he maintain it? Listen, it's just 1 game. I'm not going to come out here and say, yes, the old Montembeault is back. I'm not going there. But for what he did this week, he's one of my studs. Another one has to be Zach Bolduc. You know, I was critical of Bolduc earlier in the week, because of the fact that I thought that he was on the first line and Slafkovsky got demoted. Well, I'm wrong about that. And I'm wrong about Bolduc. Although I did say he's a streaky player, and we'll see that right now, against Utah, against Vegas, he had 2 goals and 3 assists for 5 points. Then against the Avalanche just absolutely dominated Montreal. Not a lot of people got a lot of attention in that game anyway. Let's put it that way. But through it all, you take a look at what Zach Bolduc did last week, and it was an extremely good week for him. He showed chemistry with his line mates. He got a lot of good scoring chances in danger areas. So kudos on Bolduc for really making a difference when it came to the Canadiens. Then there's, of course, Cole Caulfield. I mean, not that he was great all week long. He was creating chances. He was threatening offensively the entire week. But here's the thing. The one reason he got to be a stud was because of the goal he scored versus the Vegas Golden Knights. I am sorry. There is a very low percentage of players that would be able to hit that spot with that shot from that angle. And we've seen him do it a million times this year. It's incredible what he can do when he shoots the puck at the net. Right over the shoulder of Schmid, into the top corner, hits the mesh on the far side. I mean, what more can you say? Caulfield is generating offense. He is right now the catalyst on that line. And it's a good thing for him, but not necessarily a good thing for the team. And I'll bring that up a little bit later as we go through the show. Then I have to bring up Juraj Slafkovsky. Again, I mentioned that I thought Slafkovsky got demoted, right? But not necessarily the case. And thanks to you guys for allowing me to see it. Slafkovsky was given the opportunity to drive the second line. Marty St. Louis and the coaching staff had enough belief in Uri to put him on the second line to drive what Kapanen and Demidov were going to do. And he was good. Not only did he feed Zach Bolduc for his power play goal, but he also fed Demidov in one of the 2 only goals they got versus Colorado, and he was one of the few guys that looked good on the ice for the Canadiens in that game. And Slafkovsky, over the last couple of weeks, since he went down to the second line, has been outstanding. He's taken a leadership role when a lot of people didn't expect it, and he's only in his 3rd season in the National Hockey League. That speaks volumes to his character. And for those out there saying that the Canadiens, well, if you redraft, they should have picked Shane Wright, take a look at what Shane Wright is doing with Seattle. And then take a look at what Juraj Slafkovsky has done with the Montreal Canadiens this far. And you tell me whether the pick was wrong. I'll tell you it's not. Because of the value that he brings to the table as far as his leadership capabilities are concerned. So Slafkovsky, for me, another stud. Not just because he's producing points, but because he's driving a line and he's being a leader on a very young hockey club. Then there is Noah Dobson, who played extremely well for the Montreal Canadiens in a leadership role, and a lot of times was left out to dry by his defensive partners. And so I can't really say that Dobson played poorly. Offensively, he did contribute, and he's looked good in his own zone along with his partner, Mike Matheson. But Dobson, from where he was at the beginning of the season, looks like a completely different defenseman. Much more calm, knows what to expect from his partner, and most of the time anyway, if he's not playing with Alex Carrier, and I'll get to him later. But overall, you look at his game from both sides of the spectrum, and you can't really complain. A good investment for Montreal, despite the fact that a lot of people are complaining about Emil Heineman playing well for the Islanders. I always say, and a lot of people say it, you can't get without giving. They gave up Heineman to bring in Dobson. They didn't touch their core. I think it's okay for Montreal to have given up Heineman to get that quality of a defenseman. Then finally, one more guy that I'm calling a stud this week, and that's Josh Anderson. Josh Anderson was flying this week. He may not have gotten the results that we may have wanted, but he was all over the ice, creating scoring chances, killing off penalties, doing it all. So you got to give Anderson a lot of credit out there. He was forcing turnovers. He was strong on the forecheck, finishing body checks, creating scoring chances, as I mentioned. I mean, there was nothing that Josh Anderson did not do as far as the Canadiens were concerned on both sides of the ice. So a great week for him. And getting back to it, we'll look at it again. Montembeault, Caulfield, Bolduc, Anderson, Dobson, and Slafkovsky, my studs for the week. My duds for the week. Let me get to those now, because those are going to be really fun. I'm going to start with my least dudful player, and that is Jane Struble. Now, I'm hard on Struble despite the fact that he's out there with Lane Hudson. Playing with a guy like Hudson has to be difficult for anybody because of the fact that Hudson is so offensively inclined. That's not to say that Hudson plays a poor defensive game, but when you're pushing the puck up the ice and following it more often than not, then your partner, in that sense, is the guy who's left holding the bag afterwards, right? And Struble is oftentimes that guy, and he handles it quite well. But in the last little while, that wasn't really the case. In the game versus Utah, he struggled. And now he's versus Vegas, wasn't really used as much because he did end up having an injury. But overall, since maybe 2-3 weeks ago, I've been watching Struble, and he's making decisions that can be quite poor and that are affecting the Canadiens because they're not really moving the puck up the ice. Instead, he's just chipping it off the boards, getting it out, not really trying to generate offense to the neutral zone. That's not what the Canadiens are all about. If you're out there with a guy like Elaine Hudson and you're trying to move the puck up to your forwards, don't do it off the glass. You're not doing him any favors. Move it to an area and pass them the puck. Struble has the ability to do it. We know he can skate. We know he can hit. We know he can pass. And he's also got a relatively good shot. So why not bring those tools to the table instead of playing a more, or I should say, a less aggressive style of defense, whether it's on the offensive side or the defensive side. I'd like to see more from Struble. It's not enough. He questions himself too much, and when he does that, he makes mistakes. So, Struble, dud number one. Dud number two, I hate to say it, Joe Veleno. Despite the fact that last week he scored his first goal with the Montreal Canadiens, I didn't see enough from Veleno. I mean, I know he's trying hard. Don't get me wrong. The effort's there. The results aren't. He's going through the motions. He's not really doing anything on the ice. And, whether it's killing penalties or being out there at 5-on-5, he's not noticeable. And for a guy that's trying to salvage his career and he's on a 1-year contract, I would think you would push a little bit harder. But it's really not there. Now, I don't know whether or not it's because of who he's playing with or just because of a lack of familiarity with the Canadian systems and concepts, I should say. But I did speak to somebody who worked with Joe previously when he was younger with the Lac St. Louis Lions and playing junior hockey. And he said outright that Joe looked very good when he was playing midget AAA because of the caliber of the play. But as the caliber became higher and higher, Joe seemed to tail off. And, he's not wrong, because if you take a look at Joe Veleno in junior, as he approached his draft season, his game started to kind of wean a little bit towards the lower end of the spectrum instead of being where it was or where it was expected to be for a guy who got exceptional status into midget. So is he going to be able to be more than what he is right now? I certainly hope so. I always want good things for everybody, but I don't know that long-term he's going to have any future here in Montreal unless he turns it around. Another dud for the Montreal Canadiens, unfortunately, because I love this player, and I'm sure you do too, was Brendan Gallagher. Normally, Brendan Gallagher is a lot more noticeable for the Canadiens when he's effective. But this week, there wasn't much there. Especially in the game versus Colorado where the speed was just too much for Gallagher. And we saw that on the very first goal when he couldn't catch up to Brock Nelson. It was a tough week for Brendan Gallagher. He's nowhere near as fast as he was, and he wasn't really the fastest player on the ice to begin with. But this past week against teams like Vegas, Utah, and Colorado, he was exposed for the fact that his foot speed is nowhere near where it needs to be in order to be at the upper echelon of the league. Now, that's the reason why he's playing third and fourth line minutes, obviously. But you want to see a little bit more, especially if he's going to be on the second wave of the power play in front of the net. You need him to pester people at the very least, and he's not doing that either. So something's got to give as far as Gallagher's game is concerned. He needs to get back to that high energy that he always has because that energy is not there. It's rather flat. And so whether it's Gallagher needing to score another goal or needing to pot a couple for him to get that energy back, because last season, what was it? He scored 21 goals. Looked pretty good for the Canadiens, right? And he was energetic. He was pushing the pace. All those good things. But this year, He's not the same player. I want to see that high energy player back. Now, another dud for me anyway is the entire Montreal Canadiens offense. I'm not going to single out one player here because it's not just one player, it's everybody. And I've said this more than once. Despite the fact that Canadians are getting shots from high danger areas, they need to generate more offense. They can't go through games shooting less than 25 times and expect to win, right? There are times where their shooting percentage is going to be higher. It's not every day that Cole Caulfield is going to pick a corner that's this small, if you get what I mean. And so the Canadians need to pepper goaltenders. They need to tire them out. They can't just go in there and expect to get shots from the high slot or, between the hash marks to be able to generate offense, or wait for east-west passing in order to get one-time opportunities. They need to generate more than that. In order to do that, they need to create, what's the word I'm looking for? They need to create confusion when they enter the offensive zone by crisscrossing skating lanes, forcing defensemen to make decisions and swap partners and stuff like that. Coming in, delaying at the blue line, allowing forwards to come in hard on the rush, filtering the puck and funneling in towards the net, looking for rebounds, forcing the other team to play defense. A lot of times they don't do that. Those are the things I want to see as not only a hockey fan, but a hockey coach, because it's hockey 101. You funnel the puck to the net, you get guys in front, you create traffic, all those good things that lead to goals. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a 35% shooting percentage. It means that pucks are going in because you're getting your nose dirty. That helps players like Joe Veleno, like Gallagher, like Josh Anderson, like Jake Evans. It helps all of them. So you need to get back to playing that style of hockey. Whether it's the top six to get into it or the bottom six, and you just employ it with a certain part of your team, that's okay, right? But if you're not getting shots from the bottom six, which is apparently what's happening right now, and you're not generating any offense, then basically you're giving the other goaltender time to recuperate and save his energy for when he has to face off against those top two lines. That's not good enough. So the bottom six, they need to generate more. They need to get their noses dirty. They need to pound pucks to the net, and they need to race in for rebounds. It's simple. That brings up the amount of the number of shots. It brings up the energy that the goalie and the other team has to expend, and it creates more opportunities for the club as a whole. So get more shots. Get your nose dirty. Work. Dig in. That's what you need to do to win championships. Scoring from the outside, scoring from high percentage areas, that doesn't happen in the playoffs. So learn to do it now. And, of course, my last person who's a dud for this week is, of course, Alexander Carrier. Now, I've sort of waited before I said this about Carrier because last season, Carrier was extremely good for the Canadiens. But after the Tom Wilson hit, he hasn't looked like the same player. He doesn't engage as much physically. He is making bad reads. He is vacating his position to go try to make a play that's not there. And he's allowing the other team opportunities. In yesterday's post-game versus the Avalanche, I showed you how he came across to cover, I think it was Ninemaki or something like that anyway, some Finnish name. And he came across taking out Arbor Xhekaj and leaving Brock Nelson open in the slot. Why? Because he's had his back turned to the oncoming play. Instead of turning around, assessing what's happening, and making an educated decision from there. As I mentioned, Xhekaj had his man. Demidov was pressuring the puck carrier on the outside. There was nothing happening there until Carrier decided to vacate the slot. He did it again in another game. I believe it was against Utah, where he went to the corner to go get the puck. When Dobson was engaged with a guy on the half wall, he decided to go to the half wall and left the front of the net wide open. Those are things that Carrier cannot do. You do not have less than one defenseman in front of your net to defend. You don't depend on a forward to defend down low, simply. And you can't afford to have two defensemen behind the goal line. We've seen Carrier do that as well. Leave the front of the net to chase a guy behind the net when there's already another defenseman there. Right? If the puck goes to your side of the ice and you go behind the net, then it's on the other player who was already there to come out front and cover that area. But that's not what he's doing. Instead, he's making minor league mistakes in major league games, and that's got to stop. So it's time to maybe take a look and see whether or not Carrier needs to sit in the press box for a couple of games. just to see what's going on. Right now, you're carrying Engstrom. You can afford, assuming Strubl's healthy, you can afford to put Carrier in the press box for a game or two. Let him see the game better. Let him see what's going on. Understand the mistakes that he's making and work with him on video. Really important. Now that our studs and duds are done, we need to look forward to next week for the Montreal Canadiens and next week in HabsNation. So what's up for the Montreal Canadiens? Well, number one, on Tuesday, they face off against the Ottawa Senators. That's going to be an interesting game because, of course, Brady Tkachuk is back in the lineup for Ottawa, and you know they missed him. They needed him there, and Ottawa is always a tough team to play against with the likes of Shane Pinto, Claude Giroux, and others playing exceptionally good hockey. Then, on Wednesday, the Canadiens have to take on the Winnipeg Jets. The Jets, very good in the Central Division, always a tough team, and you know that Kyle Connor is going to score at least one, if not two goals versus the Canadiens in that game. And then, of course, on Saturday, the Canadiens are traveling to Scotiabank Arena to take on the Toronto Maple Leafs in a game that you know the Leafs are going to want after the way they played last week or 2 weeks ago versus the Canadiens on Saturday night. So what do the Canadiens need to improve to have success next week? Well, let's see. Number one, they have to have consistency defensively and in net. Goaltending, because of Montembeault, has been up and down. Dobish has been good, but of course, given the Colorado game, there's a lot of questions that came up. They shouldn't have, but it is what it is. So both the guys have been a little inconsistent of late. We want to see them get better. Each of them is going to get a start. Whether it's Dobish versus Winnipeg, Montembeault versus Ottawa, or vice versa, we're going to see both of them back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday. So they're going to need to be better. They're going to need to be solid in front of their net, and that's going to include the team being better defensively. Not just defensemen, but forwards, because we've seen a lot of mistakes being made by forwards that are ending up in the back of the net. The forwards need to apply more pressure defensively. Forget about transitioning the puck out as quickly as possible. If you want, stretch one forward, not two, because that's what's happening right now, is the Canadiens are stretching their forwards out into the neutral zone, and the center is remaining back, and that's limiting the options the Canadiens have to break out of the zone effectively. Instead of being able to pass the puck in short areas, instead they got to stretch it out to the neutral zone, and if that passes off the mark, we end up with Eisenkopf coming back into the Canadian zone. And of course, the Canadiens face-off wise were not good last week. So you need to get the Canadiens to be better defensively, work more in a cluster, and not so much spread out. And you're going to have a little bit more success. As I said, Carrier's got to be better if he remains in the lineup, and he has to make more educated decisions. He cannot continue to make mistakes by jumping into the corner to help support another defenseman when he needs to be in front of the net and make sure the net front is clear for either Dobish or Montembeault. It's extremely important. Another thing the Canadiens are going to need to have success this week is secondary scoring, right? We see goals coming from the Slafkovsky, Kapanen, and Demidov line. We see goals, obviously, from Caulfield, Suzuki, and Bolduc. But from the bottom six, it's few and far between. Anderson scored the other day, but other than that, and Evans, of course, scoring on the breakaway. But other than that, there hasn't been much there. That secondary scoring is needed if you're going to have more success. So guys like Valeno, as I mentioned, needs to be a little bit more offensively productive. Alexandre Texier, the new acquisition from Montreal, he needs to contribute. The guy's got sick hands, never uses them. That was his pitfall in St. Louis. We'll see whether or not the Canadiens can get him to do that a little bit better in the bottom six here in Montreal. And, they just need to make sure that their depth is reliable and does all the right things. Get out there, defend right. Don't take shortcuts. Huge part of the problem for the Canadiens. You cannot take shortcuts if you're going to have success. So you got to make sure from A to Z, you follow the game plan, you stick to the structure that you're given, and you get things done. Canadiens didn't do that the other night versus Colorado. Had trouble with that versus Utah, still coming out with the win. But overall, they need to be a hell of a lot more reliable and consistent, and they need to be a lot more communicative. You do not see them talking to each other on the ice. It's probably what leads to a lot of these misreads and bad coverages by Montreal. They need to talk to each other. The goaltenders, you can't really see whether or not they open their mouths, but the goaltenders have to be vocal. If there's one thing that you can do that players can't, is a goaltender is always facing the same way on the ice. He's always looking at what's oncoming, not what's behind him. And when a defenseman has his back turned and can't see, that it's up to the defenseman to help him a little bit. Yell wheel to tell him to move his ass and start skating behind the net. Man on. Move. Whatever it is. Do something. Yell at guys to get out of your way if you can't see a shot. Yell at your guys to move players from in front of you if you can't see the shot. All kinds of stuff like that. Everybody on the ice needs to be vocal. You need to be able to talk to each other, whether it's on the bench when you're setting up a play in between shifts or whether it's on the ice when you're playing with each other. Talk. Figure it out. Because if you're not talking and you're not communicating, you're not playing well as a group. I learned that a long time ago, and I've always taught my players, I don't care if you're on the ice and you talk to each other, but if you're going to do it, be constructive. And then, of course, the Canadiens need to move their feet and stay disciplined. If there's one thing the Canadiens do not want to do is get behind the 8 ball as far as penalties are concerned. They've done a relatively good job of that, granted, but because of the effectiveness of the penalty kill, which hasn't been that good, and because of the fact they're not winning as many faceoffs as you would like, the one thing you need to make sure of is that you stay out of the penalty box. It'll be nice to get power plays and a few more of them if you drive the play, but if you're not driving the play, as I mentioned, and you're not pushing the envelope, then you're not drawing penalties because you're playing mostly perimeter hockey or you're trying to over-finesse the puck. You're not going to draw penalties if you're not playing with energy. So you need to get your nose dirty. You need to get in there. You need to muck it up. You need to force the other team to make plays. You need them to reach out with their stick, hook you, slash you, grab you, whatever it is. A lot of that's on the bottom six, but the top six as well can do it. And by the same token, in your own zone, you need to be better. You cannot be out there grabbing, clutching, and all that stuff. You need to keep your feet moving. You need to make sure that you mirror guys when they're in your zone, and you need to make sure you stay within a stick-length gap from the guy you're covering. More than that, and you're asking for trouble. So that's what's coming for the Montreal Canadiens this week. Ottawa, I draw a blank again. Winnipeg and Toronto. Are we seeing another week where they get 4 out of 6 points? It's possible. You may even see a week where they get 6 out of 6 points. Toronto's still not playing their best hockey. The Winnipeg Jets, hot and cold, but a really good hockey team, and normally they give the Canadiens fits. And then the Ottawa Senators. As I mentioned, the Senators, Brady Tkachuk back on the ice for the Senators, so you know they're going to be out there playing with a lot of energy, and Brady always brings a lot of energy, especially when he's playing at the Bell Center. So the Canadiens need to bring that same energy. They need to work hard, and they need to push the other team to force them to take penalties and to give them more offensive opportunities. And they'll be able to see some success. 4 out of 6 points, I think more than possible, highly likely, and the Canadiens can absolutely do it if they continue playing the way they are. Especially important to be able to get that is goaltending. Montembeault and Dobish need to continue playing as well as they have been. And the Canadiens are going to be able to have success. So, strengthen up the D. Keep the goaltending coming. Make sure you remain disciplined and win the special teams battle, especially when it comes to being on the power play. And, of course, remain consistent in your defensive zone. Those 3 things, the Canadiens will be able to pull it off. Tomorrow, I'll preview the game versus the Ottawa Senators. Thanks for watching. We'll see you at the preview show tomorrow.